Welcome back to Fast Market on Schwab Network. I'm Diane King-Hall alongside Kevin Hinks over at the SBUX. Time now for our cash tag segment. For that, we want to bring in our next guest, and that's Megan Brantley, Vice President of Research at LikeFolio. Today, taking a look at StarBucks. So, Megan, listen, StarBucks has been flagging this week off the back of its quarterly results. So who's winning the coffee wars?
You know, whenever we look at StarBucks, this has been a name that we've been following for a while that we say, we're still waiting on that turnaround. I think that investors have been really hopeful that new leadership can turn the ship around. But when we look at our data, we just still aren't seeing signs that this is happening. And on the flip side, as you mentioned, in terms of the coffee wars, while StarBucks is still by far the major leader in this space, right? We have a ton of other smaller companies that are up and coming that seem to be chipping away at this share. Some at the top of our list, one of these at least is publicly traded, and that's Dutch Bros. And you see that on the top of this chart here. And you can see that that forward-looking demand is up about 19% year over year. We've got Scooters Coffee, which is another kind of drive-through establishment. It's up about 12% year over year. Seven Brew is a name that's not on this chart, but its growth is so exponential. I couldn't even put it on this chart because the bars would be so muted. And then on the bottom half of the chart, you see these legacy players that are much larger, right? So you have your Dunkin' and your Starbucks. But if you look at that year-over-year change for Starbucks, down about 21%, this is actually the exact same loss of momentum that we recorded the last time we talked about Starbucks. So we're not necessarily seeing any signs of improvement. And this is that time where we're heading into fall. We're in pumpkin spice latte season, right? They just launched some new menu items. We'd expect to see a little bit of improvement. We'd expect to see a little bit of consumer enthusiasm. And while we saw a brief blip right when they released this protein cold foam, we haven't seen Starbucks be able to hang on to that consumer enthusiasm, consumer momentum. So for us, we were on the sidelines for this earnings report, and, we're still on the sidelines for Starbucks because we just aren't seeing consumers rally around the brand like they once have.
Megan, I saw the LikeFolio data. I looked through one analyst report after another, searching for some type of positive note on Starbucks. And frankly, I just couldn't find one. 3, 4, 5 different analyst notes, and they're all talking about the growth is not there, the valuation is too high, and it's just not happening. And smaller brands are doing well, and Starbucks, although the one positive I did see, they're slightly improving in China, Megan, but everything else, other than the hope that these are kitchen sink quarters and they're throwing everything bad. And Brian Niccol, who has a track record of turning around companies, he did it at Taco Bell, did it at Chipotle, that he can do it here. But this road is going to be harder than the others because I can't find anyone who's bullish on this name, Megan. It's really quite alarming to read what I read. There's just not a lot of hope up there without some dramatic change here, Megan.
Yeah, and I listened through the earnings call, read the earnings report, and if you listened on that call, the big thing that management kept hitting on, what they're really focusing on, is service. They're really investing in staffing, investing in their baristas, trying to cut down delivery times and wait times for consumers who are coming in the store, for consumers who are going through the drive-through. I think they mentioned this green apron service 32 times, I counted, okay? And while they are making improvements, while they are becoming a bit more efficient, this isn't selling the customer. This isn't what's resonating for the customer. If you think about a customer, they're saying, well, I can go run through 7 Brew in 2 minutes and get just a regular cup of coffee at probably a lower price. And I think that what also isn't helping Starbucks is when you look at their core demographics, the company even admitted that they're spending less and visiting less. And these younger consumers are especially impacted right now heading into this holiday season. We saw the same thing with Chipotle. Also a Brian Niccol tie there. And so I think that, Starbucks just has some headwinds. And while they're certainly, investing in a better quality experience, we just haven't seen that move customers yet. We haven't seen that move the core base yet. And I think that there's still some uncertainty around, coffee costs, around overall labor costs and things of that nature. When we look at chatter on X, we still see a lot of unhappy baristas, a lot of unhappy just labor comments in general. And so I think that there's a little bit of heaviness associated there with the brand and the product that, I honestly was shocked whenever I heard that Starbucks was releasing a cold foam protein product. I thought, oh my goodness, this is going to really, really get people excited, and expected to see a shift in our data, and it just hasn't shown up yet. It was a brief blip right upon release, and it doesn't seem to be holding. And so this is one of those cases. This is an enormous company. This is the leader in coffee. We just aren't seeing those signs of improvement that apparently other analysts aren't seeing either.
So, Megan, I wonder if it's just about time, though, because, look, the top brass saying, this is basically, they didn't put out that forecast. They'll do this in forecast in 2026. So I can see why the stock was dinged. They said, the CFO saying, quote, turnarounds are difficult to forecast, and they know that recoveries are not always linear. And, it would be tough, I think, to bet against, for instance, Brian Niccol. Now, they have the headwinds, right? Coffee prices are higher, so they could potentially have to raise prices. That's a difficult decision that they'll have to make on that front. But I have noticed the shift personally in terms of the service. I do think it's picked up and gone back to kind of the old Starbucks, which was nice. Is it just a time thing?
I think that could certainly help, and that's what we'll be watching for, to see if the consumer starts to notice these changes and starts to prioritize, a better experience, a better, cup of coffee, is willing to pay more. But right now, whenever we look at just across the landscape, I was looking at a slate of companies reporting upcoming, and one that we're starting to really see traction with, unrelated to Starbucks, is McDonald's, but it's because of that value menu. And I know that that's something that Starbucks has really been unwilling to kind of dip their toes in, a perceived value menu. And that's something that I think near term would really resonate with consumers, being able to just order a simple cup of coffee at perhaps a lower price than they're able to right now. And I think that's why, at least in the near term, these competitors are doing so much better and gaining a little bit of momentum, partially because they're smaller. So when you look at the growth, it's a lot easier to grow from, a much smaller point than Starbucks is, but also because they're able to tap into that value perception and, just a more simple ordering process than perhaps Starbucks is, because they do have so many customizable options, and their, perceived quality is higher. So I think that time will tell, and especially as we're coming into this, winter season, this is also, while pumpkin spice latte is huge, also, the holiday season is big with holiday themed drinks. And so we'll certainly be watching for traction there, and we should get a pretty good read. But for now, at least for now, as I mentioned a couple of times, we're just sidelined because we haven't seen that momentum quite yet. But certainly one would hope time would help, and especially with a leader like Brian Niccol, that he can, if anybody can turn this ship around, it's likely him.
Yeah, well, certainly hope so. Maybe they need to do better marketing, because I know they used to do something. I don't know if they still do it, where you could get like a refill on your coffee, not the fancy drinks, but the regular drinks throughout the day. And that provides some value. All right, we'll put a pin in that conversation. That's Megan Brantley, Vice President of Research at LikeFolio. Have a great weekend, Megan. All right, let's bring Joe Mazzola